Hello and welcome to the Valencia Property Podcast again. In today's podcast, we can't just leave you hanging, so first we have an update on last month's podcast about the devastating floods. Then we're talking about the lead up to Christmas and the New Year and what's happening in the market and what we expect for 2025. And that's probably the most difficult year to predict ever because of the potential for various black swan events around the world. Then we'll take a look at a very successful month for us in terms of sales. We'll go through some of the blogs you may have missed too. And we're also looking at a new potential scam, which almost cost one of our clients €900,000 when they sold their house. It's an interesting story for sure. Two announcements to start though. Now, we've already announced this on the blog, but just in case you missed it, here it is on the podcast. As a company, we've decided we're no longer dealing with clients wanting to buy for reasons of Airbnb. We wrote about this in one of the blogs, but it's important to emphasize it here. We don't want the local community destroyed, priced out, or disappearing, and if we can help that in just a small way, then so be it. So if you contact us asking for a place that you can use for Airbnb-ing, we won't be doing it. Also, we will no longer be dealing with people wanting property under 200,000 in the city itself. This is because we feel the local community needs it more than our clients, largely thanks to the effects of the flooding, and there are just so few places available. If something is available in the city under 200,000, then there's such a shortage that those desperately searching for somewhere to live after the flood should have first dibs. I think that's reasonable. Outside the city, we'll still work with you on that sort of property because 1, you get better properties in the price range and there's much more choice, and 2, you can actually buy them. Most of those in the city under 200,000 are at that price for a reason, so it's time to tell you a few secrets of those underpriced places. You might see them on Idealista, you might see them on any other property portal. It doesn't necessarily mean you can buy them. The properties under 200,000 will have one or many of the following things that should make you think twice about trying to buy them, because you either won't be able to, or you won't want to. So first, it's VPO. VPO is a Vivienda de Protección Oficial, which is council housing officially, and you cannot buy it because you're not on the list. We've written an article about VPO properties, and of course you can find it in the show notes. 2. It's on a high floor without a lift, think 4th or higher. Lesser need for a gym membership, but more need to tip the Mercadona grocery delivery people as they bring up all your food to the 5th floor. 3. It's got squatters. If you can't visit it, then there's a reason. 4. It's had squatters. It's been destroyed and the wreck is being sold off by a bank. Talking about bank properties, 5. It's a bank property and you cannot buy it as the know your client process is, let's just say, challenging to say the least for people coming from outside the country. 6. It's a bank property and you cannot buy it unless you are registered for an auction. And that price isn't really the price anyway. It's just the starting point for the auction, not the price it will be sold at. 7. It's in a building with structural issues such as aluminosis, which we have talked about before, which is a problem of the concrete. 8. It doesn't really exist. It's just an advert to get people to put down a deposit to reserve it before the scammer disappears with your money. Or it's an advert to get your details so that the agent can continually hassle you after. That's why there's nothing left that is under 200,000 that's worth it really. The odd one comes up at times, but it flies. If you're here and when one comes up and you want to go for it, great. But we'll pass because doing all that work with you beforehand and when you get here and then finding you can't buy it or it's just been sold, it's a total waste of time for you and for us. Onto the floods. There are still piles of cars all over the affected area, covered in mud, covered in I don't know what. People are still cleaning up after the mess. Insurance companies are still estimating the damage done for people, and people are still living hand to mouth with donations. But those donations, wow, just wow. The people of Valencia, the people of the region, and the people of Spain, and also internationally, well, people stepped up and donated. But there's always a however. The distribution of those donations and that help was in a lot of cases lamentable. The local and regional government has failed at every level over the last month, and the national government hasn't been much better. But the local government has to take the vast majority of the blame for the lack of warnings and the lack of response. Mathon, head of the regional government, has to go, and the PP have to face the consequences in the next elections. They should be wiped from the map like the towns affected. They won't be, because people have short memories, and the press will blame central government rather than local government. Just to point out though, the city remains totally unaffected and life goes on as before, except for the fact there's a lot more traffic because the public transport from the south of the city doesn't exist at the moment. The bits to the north and northwest of the city are unaffected too. It's amazing how localized this flooding was, and at the same time, how huge and widespread the effects were. There was a fantastic article about it in the New York Times last week, and it's definitely worth a read if you can find a gift article link or a subscribe to the New York Times. Moving on, it's December now, and the end of the year is nigh. The market continues to be strong, very strong. This is likely to continue in the early part of the new year, but there are chances of some major black swan events happening which maybe have an effect on the market both here and elsewhere. If the orange shit given Trump brings in his tariffs, then the US economy will nosedive. And when the US economy does nosedive, the rest of the world catches a really bad cold. Escalation of the war in Ukraine and elsewhere, with the North Korean incursion, for example, and US and UK bombs being sent into Russia, could change things either way. Price rises through hundreds and thousands of refugees, and price drops because war, even far away, isn't good. Interest rates should continue to drop, and this makes property more affordable for buyers, those buyers who are getting mortgages, of course. Climate change continues, and if the Atlantic conveyor belt does stop and freezes northern Europe even more over the next few years, people will move south. Equally, heating via global warming could also mean people moving north. People could actually pass each other in the middle. The world is in a bit of chaos at the moment, and it could go either way in the property market, but that might be the least of our worries. It's the climate that matters, and breakdown of traditional climate models cannot be ruled out. But people still need places to live, and there is greater and greater demand in the best places to live. Valencia, of course, is one of the best places to live. In terms of sales, we've just had our most successful month ever again. This is in terms of sales volumes, and it's the fourth time this year that we've beaten our previous records, and that is where the market is at. It's still running hot, but the client funnel is slightly down on last month, and maybe this is a signal that things may slow down soon. It could also be just a signal that we're coming to the end of the year, as this happens every year without fail before picking up straight after Christmas and the New Year. We've been selling properties in La Liana, Ribarroja, Valencia and Ep4 this month, and we've managed to get a few golden visas over the line before next month's probable cut-off point, although there is some new news on that. We have some very happy clients as a result. The news, of course, is that, well, it might have been delayed again because the first bill going through Parliament was rejected in the Senate. So now it has to be passed back to the Congress, and we'll see what happens there. There might be some things changed on it. It might mean that it disappears altogether and doesn't get cancelled. I don't think it will, but at the moment, it probably means that there'll be a bit of a delay again. Earlier on, I told you about a little scam that almost affected one of our clients, and you need to know about this if you are selling your house in Spain. For years, we've been saying that when you buy, you get a bank draft from your bank and you take it to the notary. They hand it to the owner, get the keys, job's done. The owner takes the check to their bank and deposits it. However, a lot of banks are now insisting on an OMF transfer to make the payment, and that is a transfer through the Bank of Spain, which, in theory, immediately appears in the seller's account. But what if the seller's account isn't the seller's account? So this week, we had clients buying a place here. Congrats, Tim and Sabine, by the way. But last week, they were selling their house in Mallorca, and this is where the potential scam happened. The day before their sale, a mail arrived purportedly from their email address asking the notary to inform the bank of a change of destination account for the funds to be paid the next day and to be put into the deed contract. Equally, it was accompanied by a certificate of ownership of said account in their names with the bank's stamp on it and their signatures. The notary's official, secretary, changed everything in the documentation in preparation for the signing the next day. However, it was a total scam. This was discovered the next day when everyone arrived at the notary's office to sign, and it was discovered because the lawyer they were using for the sale took a close look at the deed and asked the question, "Did you send a mail yesterday asking to change the bank account you wanted the money sent to?" Now, of course they hadn't. So they checked the bank details, and obviously it wasn't theirs. The notary actually commented that they were lucky they were using this particular lawyer because most don't bother looking at all the details. The money was sent to their account correctly, and they were able to proceed with their sale and then their purchase through us last week. So why and how did this happen? And why might it have been a successful scam? Well, the notary's official's account had been hacked. The scammers had hacked into the mail account, found any ongoing sales details which hadn't been completed but were due to be completed with a bank transfer, faked the email address field in the mail they sent, and forged the bank account document after copying it from the notary's official's account inbox. The reason it was spotted was because the solicitor was diligent. The buyer's bank were given the details for the transfer beforehand. So if nobody says anything, that $900,000 goes to the wrong account. And many times, nobody says anything in a notary's office because they assume everything is sorted. A check is needed with the bank before the transfer to ensure the funds are going to the right place, and sometimes nobody is there to perform that check. Many banks just require the buyer to phone them and say, "You can do the transfer now," and they confirm the account number previously given. Many people sell without using a lawyer, and because they were not aware of the mail having been sent in their name because of the hack, they would just say, "Yeah, send it to the bank details provided." There would be no further check. Now, this cannot happen with the bank draft system, but it's possible with a totally online system where a hack has occurred. The lawyer's done a good job here. It's something to be aware as this is the first time in 25 years of doing this work I have ever seen an attempt to steal like this in Spain. I believe it happens in the States and it happens in other countries. Be vigilant and always ask the question, is the money going to the correct account? Confirm it with the sellers. The transfer is only done after the notary has the seller's signature on the deed. So if that money doesn't arrive, it has still been paid for, and the seller has signed off that the destination account is correct because they weren't aware of the change. Always double and triple check. And lastly today, over the last 2 months we've been continuing to produce blogs every week, and we even put up a couple of extra ones because of the floods. But here we're going to mention to you the blogs that you should take a look at if you've missed them recently. At the start of October, we talked about why the seller doesn't care about your plans. It's an interesting way of telling you to keep back a bit of information as a buyer if you don't want to increase the price you might be paying to the seller. We then moved on to how much you need to have saved to buy at each price point if you are thinking of getting a mortgage. There are a lot of dense financial details in there, but it's worth a read for a reality check. We then had one of our lifestyle design articles about the lifetime value of your property and move to Spain. And then we talked about our decision to no longer deal with investors for Airbnb, as we mentioned earlier. Moving into November, and because of the American election results, we talked about escape routes from the States for Americans and how to do it quickly. And we emphasised this with one of our later posts about how long it may take to buy a Valencia property, and one of our sales that took just 13 days, or just 9 working days because there were 2 weekends in there. And believe me, we've been dealing with a lot of people looking to escape that hot mess that is the States. We talked about the situation of the market in late November as regards the floods, demand and prices. And we also made a page about the best of the Valencia property blogs in 2024 for you to be able to find posts more easily. The only one we haven't mentioned was about the blog itself, why we write it, how we do it, and what it does for us as a niche marketing product. Of course, you can see all of those links in the show notes below, and we hope you'll have a nice evening of reading to be more informed when you get here and ready to buy your own Valencia property. For now though, As usual, we sign off until next month and 2025, when we will be back on the podcast again. Contact us on information@valencia-property.com if you have any questions, or even if you just want to say hello. We're also now knocking that open sewer that is Twitter on the head, and you can find us more regularly on Blue Sky for day-to-day updates of what's going on in Valencia and to see our properties on there. And of course, we're on other social media such as Facebook, Instagram and more. You'll see our links in the show notes. Remember, you can ask us to include you on our WhatsApp group for instant notifications of new properties, price drops, bargains and new blog posts. But until next month, it's bye from all of us here at Valencia Property. We hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. For all of you thinking of escaping Trump and the absolute chaos that is about to engulf the States, we look forward to seeing you here. The resistance is real.